Just a quick aside, I've got on screen right now a couple of images, a couple of bits and bobs which I think will better illustrate my point as a mood board of sorts. That's okay. I just thought to give a bit more context and meaning behind what I'm talking about, plus to help me align my own thoughts. So, hello. First of all, my name is Marco, just to formally introduce myself. I am originally from Spain. I've been bothered about living here and there. I've lived in the Middle East. Now I'm living in Rio, in Brazil, that is, as a digital nomad. That means sun, sand, and so forth. My days right now, they're pretty evenly split between, I've got Portuguese classes in the morning, and I'm doing class stuff in the evening. Which is great because it's a real nice balance, and actually I feel like I'm in a pretty creative spot right now in my life, which is what really motivated me in the first place to go for opportunities quite like this one. In terms of my background, I consider myself a little bit of a nerd, a little bit geeky when it comes to things like tech and video games and music and so forth. I'm musical, so I do play the piano, I play the guitar. I'm actually involved in a bunch of theatre groups as well back home. But all in all, my background is originally in linguistics and phonetics. Actually, all my family have always been in that side. I'm the odd one out in that sense because I've moved away from this, and I've come to realize that I care less about how studying how languages formally work and actually more how systems really work. So the reason, I'm just about old enough to remember when the internet was a place that you and I could actually physically walk away from, which we just don't have that luxury anymore, right? So the internet for me is a place where elections are won, it's where fortunes are made, it's where relationships start. And just to ignore the internet, just to pretend like it's not there, is sort of resigning yourself to an old dying world of the last century. Whereas right now, the exciting thing about the internet for me is that it's a place where you can connect to people all over the world. It's where we can consume more information than ever before, just to the point where the amount of options are basically infinite, and I cannot conceive of anything more exciting than that. So the funny thing is, though, my way into the internet was anything but conventional. I've never formally studied computer science in that case for a long, long time. I didn't even think there was a space that I could walk into, but it was curiosity and a good dose of wanting to just stay ahead in the world of AI and so forth, which led me into studying and trying out AWS as a place to start. Of course, everyone first makes a CV, and that's what they do, and that's what I did, which is what was my Marcoverse, which is now become my personal platform of sorts. The Marcoverse for me is my is a public facing version of everything I do. That's teaching, that's mentoring, that's playing around with the cloud and so forth. But professionally, I do wear a couple of hats. I'm on one side an authorized Amazon instructor. I'm also teaching the security engineering course. I'm working as a Restart instructor, AWS Restart, which is a way of helping absolute beginners, many of which are people from non-technical backgrounds, myself included, break their way into cloud careers. So I understand that journey very well. I now currently work in a more technical role in a cloud consultancy firm up in Manchester. So that's definitely helped sharpen up my skills. Okay, to answer your three questions, first of all, a project that you built and what did I learn? Okay, so one thing that might come a little bit more familiar to you is the Poly text-to-speech app. Now, this is something that perhaps, if I show you from this, might trigger a bell. Okay, so I did learn this from your machine learning walkthrough. Of course, true to form, I just couldn't copy and paste the whole thing. I had to go ahead and tinker with it. I had to go ahead and mess about with it. I had to go ahead and make it my own. So what I've got here is a version of that. So you know what this is, right? So you just take some text in. I've got a couple of pre-selected choices, so I'll choose a voice. Why not? There we go. So it's going to go ahead and get Poly to spit out some speech. I can always guess
how many jelly beans are in a jelly bean jar, even if that number is not right.
Okay, so you know how it works better than anyone, right? So there's going to be a fully serverless app in the background. There's obviously the front end is hosted by Amplify. The background is running Lambda functions triggered by an API gateway, and Poly is doing the speech synthesis. The link's still live if you want to go ahead and get it out. But what I've done is I've baked into this my own personalities, just to answer your question more formally. What I learned from this wasn't something technical. It's really just realizing how different projects starts to feel like your own once you've got your fingerprints on things. So it's pushed me to think more critically in terms of how API gateway really works and how cores works, gosh. But as well, just to teach it forward. I wanted to make something that I knew how it worked, and also it was understandable enough, and I could go to the console and help people explain this from the inside out. Okay, so it also was a fun thing just to build for the joy. So what's the difference between S3 and EBS? Okay, so the way I usually explain things is just because the two things get bundled together all the time, they are solving very different problems. S3, of course, is object-based storage. It's a giant managed bucket. It's a place where you throw files into it, PDFs and videos and media and assets. It's a place where you don't have to think about infrastructure more generally, but there's no disk, there's no drive, there's no machine underneath S3 that you're going to be responsible for. Okay, you're just going to be storing objects. Buzzwords aside, when it comes to EBS, it's more like a physical traditional disk. You know, it's something that you're going to be mounting on your computer. So, you know, when you think about block-based storage, that means something that behaves like a physical drive. Partition. Sorry, I should have got this beforehand. Somewhere that you can start to mount and format a drive on your computer just to physically have your database intact, just to have your config files on there too. Basically, anywhere when you have some fast read and write access to where the data is actually going to be tied to a physical compute instance, then that's the EBS. The key thing is that S3 doesn't really care about what you're doing with the files, where EBS does. EBS very much expects that relationship. It's part of your machine's guts. So you're not going to be SSHing into S3. You don't serve dynamic data from that, okay? Whereas EBS is made for this. EBS is made for disks that need to run from this, okay? So it sort of boils down to, are you storing data that lives with your server, or is it data that actually lives on its own that you retrieve from a server, okay? That's the difference between the two. The biggest and the last question is probably the hardest one to answer, but it won't, this is something that comes up a lot actually during my classrooms with restart side of things. When we get to the part of the course where we started thinking about job roles, and someone always asks, like, can I just jump into the solution architecture role? Because fair enough, it's an understandable question. I understand why they ask this question a lot. It's literally cloud title. It's part of the certification program. It sounds like the next natural step, to become a solution architect. But the reality is, and I know that it's not exactly an entry-level role, because it's like designing a house, right? You're not going to just hire an architect once the walls go up. It's going to be the person that you call beforehand. It's the person that understands where the plumbing is, how the supports work, how the thing looks. And that's true in the technical sense as well as for real houses, because you've got to see how things go right. You've got to see how things go wrong. It's not something that can just be passed on to someone. It's not really something that you can walk into without a lot of experience. So if you are aiming towards becoming a solution architect, the kind of projects that I would always advise to are the ones that are full on, that are often cross-platform, cross-account access, cross-vendor if possible, outside of AWS if hopefully, because in the real world it's not just purely one way of thinking, right? You're going to have a Windows operating system using a Google product to browse the internet in order to then reach something that might be hosted elsewhere. It's a hodgepodge of things. And what I want people to realize is that the real world is messy. Businesses are messy. They will absolutely need someone with experience to know how things look in terms of front end and back end and how users connect to it and, big picture stuff. To go and start asking, what's secure, what's going to go and break, why does it work the way it does, to connect parts in the way that makes more or less sense. And not just from a service point of view, from a technical point of view too, okay? Just to explain, like, what this cloud support engineer, what they do is more about when things are already existing. So an engineer often is going to be working with, they're going to be working with things that already work. Okay, usually you're going to be handled you're going to be given something that's all not working the way that it should do. So projects-wise, the best ones are the ones that you need to go ahead and troubleshoot something. The ones that are going to be focusing on fixing things, networking issues, permissions issues, software issues too. Just anything that you can't connect to it or make it work the way you expect it to. Projects-wise, honestly, half the time in my classes, when students hit those roadblocks, and they do, that is the job. That is just learning how to troubleshoot in itself is the skill that you're going to be looking for. Okay. The one thing I try to always hammer home for the students is just try to get better at these things. Just consume as much as you can. Just watch and read and listen. Some of it's going to be brilliant. Some of it will just be really confusing. Some of it will just be flat out wrong. But the more that you start to expose yourself to different ways of thinking, the more you start to go ahead and spot patterns to figure out who's making sense and filter out all the background noise and combine that with you going and get your hands all dirty. That's where the real learning actually begins. That's what builds up your instincts best. And that is what a true project is aiming to achieve there.